Thomas puts the brakes on. It was a busy time on the island of Sodor. The Sodor River Bridge was being rebuilt. Thomas had been chosen to help the builders. He was very busy and very proud. Thomas was at the building yards. He was excited. "This is the last delivery," he huffed to himself. "Then the bridge will be finished."
"Thomas, you must be careful with these blocks," said Sir Topham Hatt. "They were made especially for the bridge. There are no more like them anywhere."
"Yes, sir," Thomas replied, and he shoved carefully out of the yards. Thomas had to stop at a signal, but when he applied his brakes, he heard a squeaking sound. Thomas was worried. Stanley was there. He was taking builders to the bridge. "Hello, Thomas," said Stanley. "Your brakes don't sound good. Shall I take your load for you?" "No, thank you. I don't need any help," Thomas replied, and he shoved quickly away. Next, Thomas saw Emily. "Slow down, Thomas. There's a sharp bend ahead," she cried. Thomas applied his brakes. The squeak was much louder this time, and his brakes wouldn't work properly. Thomas raced round the bend much too fast. His wheels hit a bump in the track. Some of the special blocks bounced off his flatbed, but he didn't realize they had fallen. Thomas was worried about his squeaking brakes. "I know," he thought. "I'll puff more slowly." Thomas arrived at the top of a steep hill. As he went down, he started to roll faster. He applied his brakes, but they still weren't working properly, and the squeak was even louder. Gordon was puffing up the hill.
"Slow down, Thomas!"
But Thomas couldn't slow down. He raced into an emergency siding and hit the buffers with a big bump. More of the special blocks bounced off his flatbed. They tumbled down a steep bank. Now there was only one stack left. But Thomas still didn't notice. He was only worried about his squeaking brakes. Thomas set off once more, very slowly, for the bridge. Finally he saw the Sodor River Bridge ahead. "Hooray! I've made it!" he peeped. The builders were waiting. "Here's the last special delivery," Thomas puffed proudly. He knew he had to slow down now. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. His brakes had stopped working altogether. Thomas rolled towards the edge of the bridge. "Fizzling fireboxes! What can I do?" With a clang and a crash, Thomas's front wheels clanked over the edge of the bridge. His flatbed bashed his buffers with a bump. The last of the special blocks fell from his flatbed. "Cinders and ashes! I've lost one of the special blocks."
"No, Thomas," said the foreman. "You've lost them all. Now the bridge can't be finished."
"Oh no, this is a disaster," Thomas cried. Stanley was coupled up to Thomas. Slowly he pulled Thomas back to safety. Thomas was upset. "How did I lose the blocks?" he huffed to himself. Then Thomas remembered a bump on the bridge. It had made the last block fall from his flatbed. "Maybe the other blocks fell when I had the other bumps," he thought. Thomas knew what he had to do. "Stanley, will you help me, please?" he asked. "We must take Rocky with us." Stanley was happy to help his friend. Stanley shunted Thomas behind him, and Murdoch shunted Rocky. They reached the bottom of the steep hill. "This is where I bashed the buffers with a bump," said Thomas. "Hooray! There is where the special blocks fell off." Soon Rocky had lifted the blocks onto Stanley's flatbed, and they all puffed on. Thomas and Stanley found the rest of the special blocks at the sharp end, and Rocky lifted those blocks onto Stanley's flatbed too. Stanley shunted Thomas back into the yachts, then set off proudly with the special blocks.
Good luck, Stanley. I was silly not to have asked for your help. Thank you.
A mechanic looked at Thomas.
I've come to have my brakes fixed, Thomas told him. They make a terrible squeak.
Later that day, Thomas drove back to the Sodor River Bridge. He put his brakes on. There was no squeak at all. He stopped beside Stanley.
My brakes are fixed now,
Thomas peeped proudly.